Alright, so it's been a while since we've talked about the fundamentals of being a furry. But you can't spell fundamental without fun, so let's have some fun with the video today. Today we're tackling creating a fursona, which is very much a fundamental part of being a member of this fandom. Technically, it's not required to go out of your way to make one, but even if you don't, you still have one if you call yourself a furry. At the most basic level, you can think of your fursona as your furry identity, or literally your furry persona. It's who you are in the context of the furry fandom and how everyone else in the fandom will perceive you as an individual. For many, that opens up a rather unique opportunity that you really don't get in any other community or really in any other part of your life. You get a chance to start over and have full control of how you want to be perceived in the eyes of the community. And that is pretty powerful. Making a fursona is quite an important step in integrating yourself into this fandom. And if you're like me and not the most creative type, that fursona design step can be, well, difficult. There are so many things to think about, from what species you want to use, to the colors, to the personality, and you want to get it right because that is what you're going to be putting out there for the rest of the fandom to see. And I know how hard this can be. It took me literally months to create my fursona, and even then, I'm still adding and tweaking different parts of its design to this day. However, one thing that did help me while I was creating my fursona was looking at examples of others that I liked, especially when they shared the process of how they came up with each part of their fursonas. So that's what I'm going to do for you all today. I'm going to take my fursona and break it all the way down into the individual pieces that make Finn the Panther who he is today, so you all can get an inside look into how a fursona actually comes to light. And as I go through everything, maybe you too will start to realize that creating a fursona is one of those things that may seem simple, but is definitely not easy. Let me explain. I don't care how long I end up doing this video creation thing, the most intimidating part of making them is opening up a new document to write a script and just staring at that blank page. Having to create something out of nothing will probably never come naturally to me, which probably explains why creating a fursona was so tough for me as well. Though, now that I think about it, you're not really starting from scratch completely, are we? A fursona is a furry persona, so you could always start with yourself as the base for the design. And that's what a lot of people and I did when starting out with their first fursona. Now, there's nothing stopping you from creating a brand new persona to furify, almost like it's an original character that you are now taking the role of portraying, but in most cases, fursonas are mostly a reflection of the ones who create them, or the human behind the animal character. So that's where I started, and even then, that presented some interesting design choices that I had to consider as well. Even though fursonas are a reflection of who we are, they don't have to be one-to-one copies of each other. In fact, many people use their fursonas as aspirational characters, where they create furry characters with traits that they aspire to have one day. Now, obviously, some of your fursona's traits you won't be able to have. I'll never have these strikingly yellow eyes or walk on these four-beamed pod pads. Though, if you know anyone who's getting us closer to that reality, I would like to invest. But there are things like personality traits that you can eventually gain for yourself, like being sociable, being funny, or entertaining, that you could give to your fursona, and over time, as you portray yourself as them, you'll start to pick them up for your real human self. Now, that's all well and good, but where do you begin? We have our outline for our fursona down, but we still need to fill it in with stuff. There are so many different threads that we can pull to string together how we want to be seen in this fandom. This is where, at least for me, the creativity aspect of fursona design can be a bit intimidating because there's no instructions on what to do next. It's not like building furniture. You have to create the materials and put them together yourself in a way that you're happy with. It's a lot. But it's not impossible to do, and if you're like me, one of the things that you look for when doing something creative like this is to look for inspiration, and that's exactly what I did. I looked at the composition of other fursonas and learned how all the individual pieces fit together to make one holistic furry personality. And after seeing enough examples, I applied some of those principles to my design process and ended up with something that I'm quite happy with. And that's what I'm going to share with you all. So let's take a look at all the parts and pieces that, when you put them all together, you get me, Finn the Panther. Now, for my fursona, I decided to work on the physical aspects of the character first and fill in the personality afterward, though you may find it easier to do the opposite and pick physical features that represent who the fursona is. But I went with tangibles first, so let's start with those, and we'll begin with the physical trait that arguably drives the rest of the decisions about the fursona going forward, the animal species to anthropomorphize. Now, there are entire discussions on choosing what animal to be your fursona that could take up entire videos. In fact, I've done just that on this channel before, so I'm not going to go too in-depth on the complexity of this choice alone, but I'll give you the reasoning behind coming up with a panther as the animal for my fursona. Going with the cat, a big cat specifically, was the easy part. I've always loved this group of animals, probably due to falling in love with the Lion King at a very impressionable age. So immediately, that narrowed things down from picking from a lion, tiger, jaguar, leopard, or snow leopard. You can also throw cheetahs and mountain lions in there, but those are not big cats on paper. It's a different subfamily. But anyway, that was the list of animal candidates for my Fursona. Now, after that, this is where things get a little bit irrational in my head. Right off the bat, I eliminated lions and tigers because I thought I didn't have the personality for those animals. I've always seen Sonas with those animals as large, confident, and the center of attention, a description that, at the time of making my Fursona, I didn't feel was accurate for me. The next to go were snow leopards, though it's due to a compliment that I give them. I thought they were too cute, and I don't have a cutesy personality either. Does that make sense? No? Well, that's what I thought. But that left leopards and jaguars, which honestly, I was happy with either. And I ended up choosing a jaguar because I personally like the more stockier build, and they're from the Americas, which I also am. But wait, hold on. I'm a panther, not a jaguar, right? What's going on here? Well, you see, panthers, black panthers specifically, aren't their own separate species of big cats. They are the name that we give to melanistic variants of leopards and jaguars. And as someone who is black in real life, I really resonated with the idea that both panthers and I have a special categorization, even though we're the same respective species, and thought that choosing a panther, a black version of a jaguar, integrated that part of my life quite elegantly. So that's where the panther came from, and honestly, that's where a majority of the thinking behind my Fursona went. The rest is pretty straightforward in comparison. For example, my color. My personal favorite color is yellow, but making a yellow panther is a bit oxymoronic. You'll just be back at what traditional jaguars look like. So for the base of my character, I chose my second favorite color, purple, which also happens to be on the opposite side of the color wheel, so integrating both was pretty seamless. And I kept this shade of purple quite dark to keep it closer to the design of real jaguars. Though after making these videos and taking pictures in this suit, I probably went a little too dark. Maybe that's something I can fix in version 2. But even the name Finn has a rather basic backstory. My first real introduction to animals wasn't actually with big cats. It was with an animal from the sea, dolphins. When I was a very young kid, my parents took me to one of those exhibits in a theme park where you could swim with dolphins. And while I know that's not the best thing to be supporting, that really was my true introduction to my love of animals in general. So I wanted to pay homage to that part of my life in some way. So I looked at the word dolphin, took the second syllable, and spelled it a bit more traditionally for a name. So when you put all of that together, that's how the physical embodiment of Finn the Panther was created. But the tangible traits are only half of the story of Fursona design. The other side of that, the intangibles, are just as important, if not even more important. Deciding this meant deciding how Finn was going to present himself as an individual, which led to some pretty interesting choices about his personality. I alluded to this at the beginning of the video, but I really like the idea of my Fursona being something to aspire to, so I wanted to give Finn the traits of someone who I wanted to work on becoming over time. And at the time, the main thing that I wanted to improve about myself as a person was my confidence in social settings. I am still very much an introvert, but at the time of joining this fandom, I knew that I couldn't keep hiding behind that and not doing anything social if I was going to actually make friends in this community. So I gave Finn this extreme sense of confidence and comfortability in social settings. So when I took on his personality in the fandom, I threw my human self into social situations that he would be comfortable in. It's a weird trial by fire aspect of my life that I definitely want to dive deeper in another video, so be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already so you don't miss it when it comes out. But long story short, it worked a lot better than I expected. But just like my real self, Finn's personality continues to grow and change over time. A more recent example I gave Finn is being more open to going to parties, something I definitely am still working on getting comfortable with myself. But as Finn, continued to say yes to those invitations, my comfort level in those environments has continued to rise as well. That aspect of Finn I'll probably never stop working on and changing, which can honestly be ascribed to most intangible aspects of him as well. For instance, I've already made a few videos about Finn's voice and how the one I'm using now is strictly for making videos. I talk in a completely different cadence when I'm at a con, for example, and that's by design. And then there's all the little fun things that really round out his personality, like his public disdain for canines despite them making up a majority of his group of friends, his admiration for paws, his enjoyment of hot weather, his hatred for snow, his love for balls of yarn. All of these small random things give the character a level of texture and depth that makes him interesting and hopefully inviting to interact with. So when you anthropomorphize a jaguar, make its fur a dark purple with yellow highlights, give it confidence in social settings, a voice that changes if there's a camera in front of him, and a bunch of little cat-related personality traits, you're gonna get something that looks and feels a whole lot like Finn the Panther. Though it will never be an exact copy, mainly because I'm always changing small parts of Finn's personality, just like we do with our real personalities. In fact, one thing I love about taking on the role of my persona is that the more you know Finn, the more you learn things about him, some of which are reserved for good friends only and can lead to things like inside jokes, just like in real life. Now, when it comes to your persona, you don't have to take all of these details, fill them out for yourself, and see what you come up with. You can be a lot less detailed than this, or a lot more if you want. For example, Finn doesn't really have a backstory, it's just me. But if you want one for your persona, please give it one by all means. At the end of the day, when you're making a persona, you want to make something that you're proud of, proud enough to be seen as it in the furry fandom. Along with that, it should also be fun, because I'll tell you one thing, if you have fun coming up with your persona, you're gonna have a grand old time acting it out in the fandom. So I hope that this video serves as one of many resources that you choose from when trying to come up with your persona. It's not every day that we get to have full control of how we want to be perceived, so take full advantage of that and create a furry persona that you fall in love with. Alright, that's it for this one. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you on the next one, but until then, stay wild out there. Peace.